بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear respected brothers, sisters, and honored educators, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We begin in the name of Allah, the most merciful and the most compassionate, and we ask Him to make this gathering a source of knowledge, healing, and mental growth. It is our great honor today to welcome a truly inspiring guest, Zakiyyah, a world-renowned author, speaker, and soul care mentor. Known for her soul-touching books and reflections on emotional healing, she has authored more than 50 works, including novels, short stories, and self-help, many of which are taught in high schools and universities around the world. Her writings have been translated into multiple languages and continue to touch hearts globally. Zakiyyah, also known as Ruby Moore and by her Muslim name Bayena Siddiq, is not only an award-winning writer, but also certified in rapid transformational therapy and hypnotherapy. She holds a bachelor's in elementary education, a master's in English language learning, and Cambridge's CELTA certification. Currently based in Dallas, Texas, she continues to dedicate her life to guiding others through spiritual and emotional healing, and we are deeply privileged to benefit from her wisdom today. Sister Zakiyyah, Jazakumullah kul khair for being with us, and we can't wait for this wonderful lecture. Please go ahead, the mic is all yours.
Jazakumullah khairan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulullah amma ba'ad. Again, thank you for having me. Today's topic is really close to my heart, and I would love to hear you all's questions and reflections afterwards. So what I'm going to do is just talk about supporting Muslim youths. I'm so used to talking about Muslim women's health, supporting Muslim youth's mental health just by using certain excerpts and descriptions from 3 of my novels, inshallah, if we have time. And then, inshallah, we'll have a discussion afterwards. All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, so there are 3 common questions that Muslim youth struggle with today, and I just took some of the ones that were addressed in these novels, but these are ones that even when I'm working with youth and when I'm working with clients, these things come up a lot. So number 1, which is something taken from the novel Hearts We Lost, what happens when what your own heart wants in life and marriage conflicts with the expectations from your family and culture and with their understanding of religion? Okay, number 2, which is taken from A Dilemma in a Voice. What happens when your own mother opposes everything that your heart and soul want most in the world? Then you can't even marry the person you want. And then finally, from Realities of Submission, what happens when the faith community you thought would be your spiritual refuge from family problems becomes a new battleground full of judgmentalness, cliques, and spiritual crisis? And what happens when you yourself join in the clique of judgmentalness and then see your own life and faith fall apart? And this struggle itself, any of these challenges that anyone faces, even before you get the answers, this can take a heavy toll on your mental health. And a lot of youth who are going through these different challenges are not even aware of mental health. They just know they're struggling. They don't have the support that they need. And many times they turn to solutions outside of Islam and the Islamic community and their families for solutions. And many times, unfortunately, find themselves in a worse situation than what they were trying to run from. Okay, so let's look at the first question. Okay, what happens when your own heart, what happens when what your own heart wants in life and marriage conflicts with the expectations from your family and culture and with their understanding of religion? And to get a glimpse into how this looks, I'm going to give a description of the book itself, so you can get an idea of the context in which this is happening inside of the book. And then I'm going to give an excerpt from one of the characters in the book to dive a little bit deeper into some of the conflicts happening in this. So I just took an excerpt from the back cover just so you all can get a context of what is happening in the story. So in this novel that spans the Atlantic from Saudi Arabia to America, Zakiyyah shares with readers a heart-moving tale of faith, betrayal, and affection. Sharif, the main character of this novel, after completing his undergraduate studies in America, is asked by family and friends to leave the comfort of the land he has known since childhood to study at a prestigious university, Islamic University in Riyadh. Hunted by the sudden death of his father, who would have wanted this opportunity for his son, Sharif reluctantly agrees to the proposition and to assuming the position as imam over the small suburban Maryland masjid, where his father once held the same post. After his 6-year study abroad, Sharif returns to America changed in ways he cannot fully comprehend. Now doubting his engagement to his childhood friend, Sharif is confounded by questions of marriage and how he should practice the Islamic faith. As he searches for answers to spiritual perplexities and the deeper affairs of the heart, he finds guidance in a vision he sees while asleep, a vision that is made all the more perplexing when it manifests itself in real life. So this is the backdrop of what is happening in the story. So what I'm going to do is just read an excerpt from his fiance, who he's doubting his marriage to, and she's going through her own challenges in this book. And this is where we highlight what a lot of youth are going through as they navigate, especially in the United States of America. And I know it happens all over the world, but just the expectations of what it means to be a Muslim with the reality of their own personal challenges and sins. Okay, so her name is Hasna, and I will just read this part, okay? In her mind, Hasna separated the world of Islam from her own reality. She imagined that she didn't deserve to be Muslim and that the religion was better off without her. It would be better for everyone, she told herself, if she left spirituality alone. Hearing her father recite Quran was the most difficult for Hasna because it reminded her that she should be standing behind him in prayer. To drown out the recitation, Hasna plugged iPod earphones into her ears, preferring to sulk in self-pity as she listened to singers moan soulfully about broken hearts and lost loves. Hearing the music fill her ears, Hasna felt as if the whole room were enveloped by songs. And her heart lifted in hope as she imbibed the stories of lovers reunited and forbidden romances rekindled. Only days before, in the solitude of her room, Hasna had brought herself to say the words she had been unable to utter since the burden of her sin overwhelmed her with recognition of accountability. Tears in her eyes, Hasna had raised her hands to Allah, chin quivering as she uttered, "O Allah, I have wronged my soul, so forgive me." Simple words they were, but it was as if a rock lay upon her tongue, choking her and obstructing her speech. When the words finally passed her lips, Hasna's body had trembled and her nostrils grew moist as she felt her utter poverty before her Lord. Before this moment, she had wondered if it were possible for her to be forgiven at all. She felt so unclean, so pitifully filthy. It just didn't seem right that she should even have hope for a place so pure and flawless as paradise. She felt it was selfish of her to even ask for pardon or mercy because she did not deserve it. "You're right," her mother had said after Hasna had replied flippantly to her urging Hasna to ask for forgiveness. "You don't deserve forgiveness." At the time, Hasna did not know whether to feel relieved or offended at these words. "None of us do," her mother added. That's what the goal of life is in the end, to be granted the mercy and forgiveness that none of us deserve. And Allah gives only to those who ask. Okay, so this is the first glimpse into an internal struggle of one of the youth in this book. And it gets right into the heart of what so many youth are struggling with as they put on this strong facade in front of the world. But inside, they really want to be better, but they don't know how, and they don't know if they even deserve to be Muslim or deserve to represent Islam. And even in the book, there's a struggle about even the hijab. Should I be putting on the hijab when I'm struggling with this sin? And all of these types of things that are going on behind the scenes. Okay, so in the second question, what happens when your own mother opposes everything that your heart and soul want most in the world? Then you can't even marry the person you want. Okay, so in the next excerpt, we are looking at a person who accepted Islam and her family is opposing her. The first excerpt, the person had grown up Muslim. In this one, she accepts Islam, and then now she has to face her mother, who is incredibly angry at this. Okay, so, but just before I start, just to give you a bit of background of the actual story itself. Now Muslim, Tamika must face her Christian mother, who instilled in her a love for Christ and made church the heartbeat of the family. Torn between her dedication to Islam, the longing of her soul, and her mother, the longing of her heart, her lifeline, Tamika struggles to find peace somewhere in between, but she finds that something must give. A story of faith, determination, and love. A voice penetrates the heart and moves the reader like no other, as the reader is transported from fiction to a reality so profound that one feels part of it. So here is the excerpt from A Voice, which is a sequel. It comes after the book, If I Should Speak. Okay, so here's an excerpt about an exchange between Tamika and her mother after her mother finds out she became Muslim. What's this? A book hit the wall in a loud thud, missing Tamika's face only slightly. And this, another one, and this. Tamika recognized this one, and she started to scream in protest. In horror, her eyes widened as she watched the scene as if in slow motion. The emerald green cover that was decorated in gold calligraphy enclosed the thickness of the Quran as it flew through the air and finally hit her in the stomach with so much force that she fell to her knees. I said, get out now. She felt the heavy hands falling on her rapidly, and she covered her head to protect herself from the blows. The continuous shouts nearly deafened her, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. She could only cry, feeling a bitter loneliness that she could not escape. Only God could save her then, and she found herself wondering if he would. Terrified, Tamika had no idea what to do. Her only instinct was to save her life, but how? She could not fight her own mother. Tamika's head jerked uncomfortably as her mother pulled her hair by force to force her from the house. Tamika stepped on the front of her dress, causing it to rip as her mother tried to yank her up. Numbed with fear, Tamika fell back to the ground in a heap. She covered her head, too frightened to move. Get out of my house before I throw you out. Tamika backed up cautiously, as if waiting for her mother to pounce on her, but her mother didn't move. She left the kitchen, walking backwards, then nervously entered the living room. In panic, she rushed to her purse, stuffing her money and whatever personal she could find back into her bag. She fell to her hands and knees in tears, feeling around the floor and the table for her address book, which she knew she would need. She was breathing heavily and desperately prayed she would find it before her mother went into a rage again. She found it a few feet from the cordless phone on the floor and stuffed it into her purse. She remembered her keys and glanced around for them. Tamika was out the door a second later, her mother shouting after her. She ran through the front yard to the sidewalk and then down the dark street. Okay, the reason I chose this excerpt is that this is a type of scenario, the psychological damage that is immeasurable. When a child who is taught to respect their parents and to honor their parents is being literally attacked by their parents, especially for something that they need for their soul. And a lot of times when people who have converted to Islam or accepted Islam, or even Muslim youth who decide to practice Islam different from their parents, and they come to us to Muslim classes or to Muslim events, they're carrying a lot of stories with them at the same time. And this is where it gets into that kind of push and pull that happens in the community a lot of times, where we are unintentionally harsh in trying to tell someone how to dress, how to live their life, all the things they're doing wrong. But a lot of people are literally walking into the masjid where hours before or days before, this is what was happening in their life, and all they want to feel is a connection to Allah. And if you go back to this feeling that Tamika had, this is a feeling that even people who have grown up Muslim, and even adults, and even I myself went through this at a certain time in my life, where the sentiment is only God can save me. But then I'm asking myself, will he? Because we don't know, we're in this spiritual crisis that is affecting our emotional and mental health, and we don't even know if Allah loves us. And we start questioning, is my life a punishment? Is this happening because I'm a bad Muslim? Whether it happens due to a disagreement between you and your parents, or it happens because you took a different spiritual path, or because they're angered because you actually did something wrong, a sin. This isn't a healthy space for someone to be in, to be attacked in this way and then have to fend for themselves and wonder if their own creator is there to help them. And obviously, we know Allah is always there, but that doesn't mean that in the moment of stress that you feel that reality at the moment. And so when these youth step into the masjid, we should have an answer for them. And then finally, the last excerpt that I will read, and it looks at the question of what happens when the faith community you thought would be your spiritual refuge from family problems becomes a new battleground full of judgmentalness, cliques, and spiritual crisis. And what happens when you yourself join in the clique of judgmentalness and then see your life and faith fall apart. And this is from Realities of Submission. And just to give a context of what this particular book is about, told in 3 parts, Renee's story tells of a stringent childhood in her father's church and her ultimate submission to the religion of her nature in young adulthood. As Renee embraces Islam wholeheartedly, the spiritual tranquility of her initial conversion begins to wane as she faces the often painful realities of navigating the terrains of the Muslim experience itself. At times humorous and at times painful, the story touches the reader's deepest thoughts and incites the familiar questioning of the human soul. So now this is told in the voice of Renee. So this is Renee speaking, and from Realities of Submission. I finally found my voice enough to scream for help. The drunk man's face changed and his actions halted, and he stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. I hollered again, and he frowned at me as though I'd misled and disappointed him. Cursing me, he turned and left me alone, mumbling something to himself and shaking his head in dismay as he walked away. Spent, I fell to my knees and took concentrated breaths to steady myself. On the train ride home, I counted the seconds until the train arrived at the university station. On the bus, I relaxed somewhat and felt myself shaking at the realization that I was almost home. The bus pulled in front of the stop nearest my dormitory, and I couldn't keep myself from walking at an unnaturally fast pace to my room. Once inside, I found the room empty, and I immediately broke down, not bothering to reach my bed before I collapsed. My crying was so terrible that my stomach heaved more than once, and I lay on the floor, relieved to be home. But more than anything, I was horribly shaken and felt the depths of darkness that I'd fallen into in my search for spiritual freedom and self-worth. And I'd found neither. Years later, when I, as a Muslim, read the Quran, read in the Quran the verse commanding believing women to wear the jilbab, the large, loose outer garment worn over a woman's normal clothes, I pondered the Creator's reason for this command. That is more suitable, that they should be known, meaning as believers, and not abused. As much as the feminist remnants in me wanted to argue that men did not discriminate between the covered and the uncovered, I knew my experience before and after wearing Islamic garb was testimony against this philosophy. Naturally, Islam recognized that there will always be those men who would verbally and physically harass women regardless of how they dressed. But it also recognized that women were most respected, when they were covered as pious women had for generations. At the time of the train station incident, the words of my feminist professors were ones with which I agreed in theory, but ones I found difficulty living in testimony to because of my experience. Yes, women should be respected regardless of how they dress or what they deem appropriate behavior. But would they? Okay, so we're talking about supporting Muslim youth's mental health. And the question comes is, how can we support the mental health of our youth? And obviously, many people will have different opinions and different explanations. But in the work that I do in my writing and the programs and classes that I teach, here's the answer that I offer. And may Allah accept our good intentions for all of us and help us all heal our youth and all of us trying to be supports for them. So how can we support? Okay, we need to support them in their journey out of their inner darknesses into the spiritual light of faith. We do this in a space of what I like to call in my programs, compassionate accountability for ourselves and for them. And what compassionate accountability means is we don't judge them or ourselves for our inner darknesses because, first of all, we all have them. We're human beings and the darknesses will never be completely gone, but we can lessen them. Okay? So we don't judge them or ourselves for our inner darknesses, but we also don't give ourselves and our lives to these darknesses either. Okay? And what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done with the Quran and what he has inspired in the message of the hikmah, the wisdom that he's given through the prophetic sunnah to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is given us a space of rahmah, a space of mercy, and also marhamah, compassion and empathy that we should use as a base ground in responding to these things. And I myself, as a mother, my daughter is now 28, have gone through my own journey of seeing how in the beginning of me being a mother, I was so firm and strict and like, you're going to do this and this is my house. You have to do what I want. And my daughter, as some of you probably know her. She's Cyber Farida online. She does a lot of help about keeping children safe online, helping parents keep their children safe online. And in her work, she tells a story of how she almost ran away. And I told her, look, you go ahead and tell the story because my dua as a mother is that maybe our story can help other people. And the reason I'm sharing this is that my daughter was done with me. Okay, so when I'm sharing these different lessons, this isn't because I had it all right. It's because I had a lot wrong and I had to change. Okay. And so what I learned that day, and she ended up coming to me and let me know she was going to run away. And in her case, to meet some non-Muslim guy. And I just broke down that day and I told her, I just cried and I told her, I don't have the answers. I tried the best that I could and I messed up. So, I pray that Allah keeps you safe. And while you're gone and I ask you to forgive me, I'm going to do my own healing to find out where I went wrong. This is what I told her. And I want to be better. And she looked at me, she had her bags packed, and she looked at me and said, "You don't have it all figured out, Ummi?" I was like, "No, I don't." And she said, "You're going to try to heal and be better?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "I don't have it all figured out either, Ummi, and I want to be better. Can we heal together?" And I was so shocked. I said, "Absolutely." And so she blocked this person and stayed home, and we took a journey together. And this is where I learned a lot about the mental health of youth, and also reflecting on my own childhood, how all this strictness and trying to control only pushes them away. And I began to mother from a space of compassion and accountability. And by Allah's mercy, we were able to come closer today. And so before we open it up to questions, I want to end with an ayah of the Quran that I use in my own relationship with my daughter. She's older now, but at that time she was like 16 years old when she wanted to run away from home. And that I also use in my programs when supporting anyone who's going through struggle, especially when we're dealing with Muslim youth. This is the ayah from the Quran that I share so very often, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in Surah Al-Baqarah, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Allahu waliyyul ladhina amanu yukhrijuhum minadh-dhulumati ilan-nur والذين كفروا أولياؤهم الطاغوت يخرجونهم من النور إلى الظلمات أولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. Allah is the wali, the friend, the protector, the supporter, and guardian of those who believe. He brings them out of darknesses into the light. And I put the plural in parentheses because in English, they're starting to change a bit, but normally they only recognize darkness as singular. But in the Arabic, al-dhulumat, this is plural. It's not just one darkness. There are many, 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 many darknesses, but there's only one nur. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying he brings them, the believers, and you'll see how he's not saying these believers are perfect or without sin. They just believe. They have their sins. They have their personal challenges. And Allah is saying that he brings them out of darknesses into the light. But as for those who disbelieve, their awliya, their friends, their supporters, their protectors, their helpers are taghut, which can be translated as any false deity, false entity, false leader, anyone who takes a person away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and away from the deen of Islam is from the taghut. So these are the ones who are the awliya for disbelievers. They, meaning these taghut, bring them, meaning the disbelievers, out of the nur, out of the light, into the darknesses. And those people, meaning who accept this invitation, because shaitan is messing with all of us, okay? We will constantly be invited away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those who accept this invitation, may Allah protect us. Those are the dwellers of the fire, and they will abide therein forever. May Allah protect us. Okay, so I want to now open it up for discussion or questions or reflections. Anything that is on your heart and mind about the supporting the mental health of our youth. And I want to add, in my personal opinion, the best way that you can support the mental health of the youth is to support your own mental health, because how you are showing up directly affects them. All right, so I'll turn it over to any questions or comments.
Barakallah fikum, Sister Zakiyyah, for this wonderful and moving lecture. Jazakumullah kul khair. We do have a couple of questions here, and we would be very grateful for you to address them, inshallah. So the first question is, when we encounter students who feel broken or lost inside, what first step would you recommend we encourage them to take towards healing? Jazakumullah kul khair.
I would say that for me, the first thing I do, especially when we're dealing with Muslim youth, is to encourage them to make sure, if nothing else, you hold on to your prayer and you read something from the Quran every day, even if it's just one ayah. So that's the first thing I tell them. And many times they say, well, I struggle with that. I say, it's okay to struggle. Just show up. And then after that, we have to realize that on this journey, they need a compassionate witness and a safe person at all times. So they're not going to be able to do this on their own. Okay, this is something we really have to realize, that although we give them advice and we're telling them, and we should, and I emphasize this all the time, even if you have questions about Islam, if you don't know what you really feel or whatever, just show up. Who can give you the answer? Allah. Talk to him and say, Allah, I don't understand this about Islam. I don't understand this. Or here's what I'm going through. And whatever questions, like I would tell them, whatever you're saying to me, say to Allah also. But whatever you do, just show up. Even if you feel empty, even if you feel tired, just show up to Salah and read something from the Quran every single day, even if you don't understand what you're reading, right? And depending on this particular situation, they may need more support, like with therapy. And I know that's not always possible, because I know, and unfortunately in many families, that the youth obviously don't have the funds or the ability to get the mental health that they need, the help with their mental health. And sometimes the parents themselves are not okay with strangers talking to them. But I would say you have to be their safe space and be a compassionate witness to whatever they have to say. Like, for example, when my daughter was, after we began our journey, one of the promises I made to her is that I'll hear you without judgmentalness and without blame. And so she was like, really? So she began to talk to me and tell me all the things she was angry about. And it was very triggering. And many times I was just like, started to feel like, you don't have a right to talk to me like this. But I told myself, and I made dua, just let her finish. And it went on, and you did this, and you did this, and you did this, and it hurt me so much. And then at the end, she collapsed crying, and she just fell into my arms. And I just held her, and I just realized she just wanted a safe space. Okay, she just wanted a safe space. And I think, like, after we give them the advice, be a safe space. And then when you need to kind of cool down, call a friend and get your own mental health help, because it's going to be hard. But remember not to take out your own personal triggers and different things on anyone who's coming to you, and let them vent. Because one of the main things that pushes children away from their parents, away from the Muslim community, and away from Islam is that they don't have a safe space to say all of the darkness that's in their heart, that they need somebody to hear and help them through. So that's how I would respond to that.
Jazakumullah kul khair, barakallah fikum. Sister Zakiyyah, I have a question from a personal perspective, dealing with my family and my children. Alhamdulillah, Allah has blessed me with three wonderful children, and I did want to ask you a personal question that inshallah everybody will benefit from. Is
Yes.
when talking about the children growing up, when is it okay to always preach and guide? And when is it time to step back and just listen and not, as you mentioned, when is it, or in time in age groups, let's say, when is it time to hold back on advice and correcting and just have them have their own space and make mistakes? Jazakumullah kul khair.
Wa'iyak wa barakallahu feek. This is an amazing question. Allahumma barik. I would say that I'm of the opinion, other parents have different points of views, but I'm of the opinion that you should start as early as possible to giving them that space to vent without interjecting. But remember, just because you don't give the guidance or the advice at, let's say, for example, they come to you at 2 o'clock, doesn't mean that at 7 p.m. you can't talk to them and say, hey, I wanted to talk to you, about what we talked about before. And sometimes it's good to give it right away. But I think like here's where being in touch with our own intuition is so important. And one of the things that I teach in my classes is this hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, where he says, Al-anah min Allah, wal-ajala min ash-shaytan. So this calm inner space and clarity of judgment in the mind is from Allah, which in neuroscience they would translate this as a space where your nervous system is regulated, right? And then ajala, this haste and unrest where you don't have clarity of judgment, is from shaitan. This is nervous system dysregulation. And what I find is that when we are in the practice of being in a space of anah, we can tell when it's time to kind of sit back, okay? And the more you give your children the freedom to express themselves at a younger age, while at the same time guiding and giving advice at appropriate times and in appropriate moments, the more you're able to be a space of trust as they get older. Now, obviously, when they're younger, there are certain things that you have to give them as foundation. I'll give you an example of something I started doing when my daughter was 8 years old. I started saying that, I decided that I wanted her to get used to making her own decisions. So when there was something she wanted to decide that really didn't make any difference to me, like sometimes she would say, can I go to my friend's house? And I didn't care one way or the other, right? But I decided in those moments, instead of saying yes or no, I told her, pray istikhara. You know what your friends told you is going to be happening there. And once you pray istikhara about whether to go, then I respect whatever decision you make. I would also do that when she wanted to go watch a movie that I didn't care one way or the other with her friends. Like some stuff was an absolute no. Don't misunderstand. I was like, no, right? And what I found was that when I gave her more room to do this, and I taught her the istikhara prayer from young, and at first she thought, yay, I get to do whatever I want. But over time, she began to take a pause and say, you know what, Umi, I was so excited to watch that movie with my friends. I went and prayed istikhara. And she said, I sat down and I looked at what was on the TV, on the screen, and I thought, I shouldn't be here. So she said, I went back upstairs in their house and I read a book until the movie was over. She was like, oh my God, I think that was Allah intervening. I said, I think it was, sweetie. So I'm saying that to say that start as young as possible, but use your intuition. It's like that hadith where the Prophet ﷺ is saying, consult your soul. When it wavers in your heart, to kind of give them more space but you have to be in a space of anat to hear that intuition. Then you know it's time to intervene. But when you have the opportunity, I would say as far as possible, listen without interrupting. And then also, like, for example, sometimes my daughter, like, she was like, and I don't appreciate this and I don't appreciate that, and then I would let her finish. And then later, when she's calmed down, I would come and say, sweetie, thank you for trusting me with that information. And I will strive my best as a parent to do X, Y, and Z better. But I do have a request from you. Is it okay? Are you able to listen now? She says, yes. I said, when you speak to me, is it okay if you just speak in a bit more of a respectful tone? Because as your mother, it hurts my heart. And I also don't want you to do anything displeasing to Allah. Is that okay? And she would say yes, but this was after years of building up to that point. And then there were times where she would come and have a tantrum and she's like, I want this. And I'm like, well, you're not getting that. And well, I can pray istikhara on. I said, you can pray istikhara if you want, but I said no. And you can't pray istikhara on something haram. Okay, so there were lines, that I drew. But I would say, a long story short point, as early as possible, when you realize that they have the ability to hear you, even if it's just on their level. So I hope that helps. If not, you can just ask for clarification.
Jazakumullah kul khair. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for answering that question. Barakallah fikum. Sister Zakiyyah, we do have another question here, if you'd be so kind. The question is, children now are very addicted to phone and other devices that find it an entertainment, and when they are asked to pray, read Quran, they find it hard and sometimes unfortunately boring. How can we make kids love Salah and being good Muslims?
So to clarify, you're saying like the phone and these devices are distracting them from the salah, and how can we make them prioritize prayer and being a good Muslim? Is that what I'm understanding?
I believe it's the challenge of making because children find video games and cell phones very entertaining. When they look at, when we ask them to read Quran or pray, how can we make it more something that they look to do, let's say, and more something that they would like to do.
My personal opinion is that unless they're doing something haram on their device, or the video game is something where that exposes them to something haram, I would say let them come to you with their schedule to say, you can get on these devices, but you need to let me know how you're scheduling your prayer, how you're scheduling your Quran, and you can only do these after you've done your obligations. Like, for example, you start the day with Quran. If it's time for Asr, you're going to stop, and so on and so forth. But I will emphasize that if they're on the devices, it shouldn't just be they just openly on their devices and that's it. There should be some type of making sure that they're safe on these devices. And that's something that's not my area of expertise. That's actually my daughter's, who specializes in that, in cybersecurity. But I will say that outside of that, making sure they're safe on the devices, let them make their schedule, because let me tell you something, as we all know, we remember when we were younger, if you really want to do something, you're going to find a way to do it, whether your parents know or not. So the best way is to let them know that as long as they have read the Quran for the day, as long as they've made their prayer, or they can show you a schedule. And this is one thing I did with my daughter. You show me of how you are organizing your time so that you're not spending excessive time on these games, excessive time on your phone. And then it's no problem. Otherwise, the devices are gone and the games are gone, or even the internet, right? And when they're faced with that challenge, most youth are going to come with a schedule, and they're going to come with a plan. Yes, they'll probably rush through the prayer. They'll probably read just, Ikhlas really quick or whatever. Or they'll read, through the Quran very quickly, or whatever part of the Quran. And that's okay. Because one of the things that I tell parents who are stressed is that as long as they are praying, And as long as they are reading the Quran, even if they're rushing through and they don't want to do it, Allah is still writing, having the angels write down that they stood for prayer and there's barakah in it. So just keep them with that. Like, and for example, and begin to integrate certain things into their encouraging of the salah. Like, for example, like when you have uh, your sons or daughters or in middle school or high school, especially, they begin to get stressed about the school day or an exam or something happening at school. Tell them, look, take a few more seconds in your sajda and ask Allah to help you with it. Just see how you feel after that. And they're like, well, what should I do? Say, well, you can give your advice, say, but I also suggest you do this, and begin to connect the salah with their actual life. And when I began to do this with my daughter, she was like, really? You could do it? I was like, yes, this is the closest you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in sujood. So ask him, say, what should I do about this bully, Allah? Can you help me through this or help me with the exam? Okay. And then I would, tell her certain parts of the Quran, like people like, oh, I have a headache, I'm stressed, over this X, Y, and Z. Say, recite Al-Fatiha, like 7 times, and just for healing, or use any part of the Quran for healing, and just see how you feel. Try as best you can to integrate their worship into the things that are the most important to them.
Jazakumullah kul khair. Thank you so much. Sister Zakiyyah, we do have another question here. Um, the um, the question is, my nephew, a Muslim a Muslim both from a mother and dad's side, just ran away at the age of 17. He has just moved to another state without parents' consent and looks like that he is with kids with the same age group. What do you advise? Should the family report him to police? My concern is he is underage, not sure if he is responsible for any consequences that may arise. Jazakallah khair.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's pretty heavy. I would say that in this case, you have to do what you truly believe is right, because I don't know the details of why he was running away. But if you really believe that his safety is at stake, contact whoever you need to, even if it is the authorities, so that he can be safe. That should be the first, focus, is his safety. If the police can guarantee that, then use them. But if there's another way, if someone in that city can kind of check on them, also at the same time, just be very mindful, especially for boys. This is a boy, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so be mindful that when a boy is in an angry space, the authorities who show up might not have the compassion that you have for this young man. And unfortunately, and I don't know if this is in the United States of America, but young men have been apprehended and lives have been lost because of the misunderstanding between law enforcement and what's going on with that boy. So be very mindful of that, because if he becomes antagonistic, and at 17, he feels like he's grown, he thinks he's grown, but he doesn't have the understanding of the complexities of himself and law enforcement. So especially if he is a person who is visibly of color, whether from the Desi or Arab background or African background or Black American, be careful that when you bring in the law enforcement to your children, especially your sons, that the way they show up may not be safe for them. Just keep that in mind. I don't know the answer to that except to say, choose the path that you genuinely believe is going to keep him the safest.
Jazakumullah kul khair. Barakallah fikum. Sister Zakiyyah, we do have another a question here. It says, Assalamu alaikum, Sister Zakiyyah. I am thankful to you for this webinar. I am a teacher in an Islamic school which goes up to grade 8. I feel we need to train ourselves as to how to deal with kids and to approach them in the correct way. I know I get judgmental and I am afraid the students will not open up to me. What should I do? What courses should I take to help myself help them? Jazakumullah kul khair. Sister Asma.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Okay, Sister Asma, I would say, Barakallahu feek, first of all, may Allah bless you for your concern. My advice, and I worked, I would say, about 20 years in education. And I would say that the best way to help them is to create an environment in your own life, first of all, with yourself and your friends, where you are vulnerable with your friends and maybe even in a therapy in a way that you want these youth to be able to be vulnerable with you. Because when you've gone through the ringer of looking at your own inner darknesses and facing them and knowing how it feels when someone looks at you and says, "What? You did that terrible thing?" And you know how it feels when someone says, "You know what? I get it. This is hard." You will begin to mirror that same type of energy when you're working with youth. And I have found consistently, by Allah's mercy, when I applied those type of tools when I was working with youth or when I was teaching in the schools, especially when I was working with high school and university students and even middle school, they pick up on, because remember, youth pick up on your energy more than your words. And this is really important. And if we think back to when we were growing up, we were in school, there were those teachers who always said the right thing about what we should do, but you were kind of uncomfortable with them because you knew they were just so judgmental, so judgmental, whereas, like, for example, one teacher's like, "Where's your homework? You need to take care of your homework because you don't know what's going to happen to you and when you get older and blah, blah, blah," right? And then another teacher says, "Where's your homework? Because you don't know, what trials you will have when you get older. You might need this information. Is there something that's keeping you from doing this?" Energy is different. But when you practice that energy in your own life, it will show up. Like when I was working with Macmillan Education and doing teacher training, specifically when I was working with some of the schools in Saudi Arabia, one of the things I would tell them is that how you show up in private is going to be how you show up in public, even if you don't realize it. Meaning, for example, like when we're doing intercultural studies, for example, it's a different topic, but it relates to this topic. I was saying that if you're at home mocking people who are of a different color, ethnicity, or whatever, don't think that that energy is not going to be picked up when you go around the students. Similarly with mental health, if we don't feel in our hearts compassion for people who are struggling when we're in private, or for ourselves, if we take the strict way with ourselves and we don't give ourselves room to be human, that energy is going to show up. So I would say the most important thing is practice it in your private life and then implement that same compassionate accountability energy when you're in front of the youth. So Asma, let me know if that helped or if I need to add anything, inshallah.
Jazakumullah kul khair. Yes, Sister Asma says Jazakallah. Jazakumullah kul khair. Sister Zakiyyah, the question about the 17-year-old youth that fled his house. I do have a note here. Jazakallah. Yes, he is black. It is in the United States. Thank you for the insightful advice. Barakallah fikum.
May Allah keep him safe. Yeah, even more so if he's black in the United States, especially in this environment, use law enforcement as a last resort because his life can be in more danger with the law enforcement, unfortunately.
Jazakumullah kul khair. Barakallah fikum. Sister Zakiyyah, I do have another question here. How should we as parents address proper Islamic covering for our daughters? She already covers, but not fully covering in the entire hair and the like. How do we connect with them properly for this? جزاكم الله كل خير.
Yeah, this is a really, really important question. And I will say I can only give you what I believe and what I've done with my daughter. Until today, she doesn't wear the covering that I believe that she should, and she agrees with me on that. What I have done is I've just told her that, sit with your own heart and soul. And before you make any decision for how you dress or, what covering you use, make istikhara. And then be honest with yourself about your own limitations, and make dua. Ask Allah to help you become stronger. And in the field that my daughter's in, the work that she does, she's around mostly non-Muslim. She wears a head covering, but she does, I tease her, I call it like the sneak peek. You show a little bit, sneak peek, and the bun. But what I do is I've learned through my journey with my daughter, everybody has a different journey with their daughters, is that trying to force her, especially in the environment that we live in the United States of America, she's an entrepreneur, dealing in the spaces she's in are almost 100%. I would say almost 100% non-Muslim. Is really, really challenging. And so one of the pieces of advice I give her is, well, first of all, when you pray, make sure you have everything fully covered. And then number two, make your tongue, I tell her this, to save yourself from falling deeper away from what you're supposed to be doing, make your tongue your last line of defense. And what I mean by that is never defend it. And she's followed my advice. I say, if someone comes to you and says, you need to cover properly, this isn't correct hijab, I said, no matter how offended you are, say, Jazakallah khairan, keep me in your dua, I want to be better. Thank you for the reminder, And then if someone from the non-Muslims asks, well, I see you covered differently from this Muslim, I tell her, just say, you know what, honestly, what they're doing is actually more correct, and then just keep making dua to be stronger, because I want to say, I don't, is this person in the United States, by the way? I don't know. If you mentioned, I didn't hear.
No, the question doesn't mention.
Okay. Well, I would say if they're in the United States or any other country of this nature, be very mindful that their discomfort of being in full hijab in the public is not their imagination. There can be harm that comes to them. It may not be the norm. It may be rare. I don't know if you all heard in Maryland, I think it was last week, a woman was shot at. Literally, someone took a gun and pointed it at her and shot toward her. She's covered in niqab. And may Allah bless and preserve our sisters who are in hijab and niqab and keep them safe. So keep in mind that if your child goes into a space and they are attacked or bullied, or God forbid, a violent act happens to them and they believe it's a hate crime, or they know it's a hate crime, this could cost them their entire iman. So what I tend to do is focus most on, make sure I tell her, nothing else, make sure you're saying your prayers, but ask Allah to give you the strength to one day to wear the full covering. But be very, very careful when you are asking young women in non-Muslim countries to go out in public in a way of dressing that they're not yet comfortable with. And it's not just about how others would treat them, it's how they would treat themselves, because they'll be jumpy, they'll be scared, they'll be less likely to be able to pick up on cues, because this is one thing I teach in my mental health work, the nervous system dysregulation. This is very real. It blocks clarity of thinking. So if someone's having a panic attack every time they go out, they become more of a target of someone who wants to prey on someone, even if it's not just because of the hijab. It can be, oh, wow, look at this woman. She looks completely stressed and out of place. And then again, this is also when young men who don't have good intentions see, oh, wow, all I have to do is come in and tell her she's beautiful and comfort her. And And so be very careful, because you want her to make a decision that she can feel comfortable in, and going out in the world where she can be her best self and protect herself from other stuff. Now, this is my own personal point of view. I know other people have other points of view, but follow the point of view that you truly believe is most correct for your situation, your life, your daughter's life, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I've just found that pushing too hard in that can put them in more danger, similar to what I was saying about the young man in trouble using law enforcement. We do have to realize that we are in an environment where we don't live in a space, especially those who are living in non-Muslim countries, where it's just as simple as wear the hijab and Allah will reward you. Yeah, Allah will reward you, but you'll also be discriminated against. You'll also be targeted. You'll also be harmed. You'll also be stared at. So these aren't small trials. You know, and even in the Quran, Allah, there's an ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about how when someone offers you the greeting, don't say to them that you're not a believer. You know, he's basically letting them know that you don't treat someone a certain way. And then he says that because you were that once, right? Like you were in that space once and Allah saved you. And I'm just summarizing the gist. If anyone has the actual ayah, you can drop it in the comments. But Allah is letting us know that spiritual development happens in stages. And one of the things I talk about in my classes is how you need to look at spiritual development like the development of a child in a womb. Like if we look at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that the ummah is a single body, right? And if you look at that as the body of a mother, right? This is in the womb of this ummah are the spiritual children, which is all of us, at different stages. And the only way to ensure a healthy, full-grown life is that you respect what that fetus, you know, figuratively speaking, needs at every stage of development. You can't rush any part of that, okay? And if you try to rush it, you'll just harm it, and then it can harm the child in their development. So this is where the intuition, when I was talking about the anah, that nervous system regulation and space of calm and clarity of judgment, is so important. It's so important because even though it becomes cliche, but it's absolutely true, the inner world of the believer is more important than the external, because when you fix the internal, the external follows immediately. That's why in the Quran, Allah talks about how the salah will stop people from munkar, from doing bad deeds. And this is one of the things I teach my daughter, is that no matter what, keep up your salah, and one day Allah will put in your heart the ability to do this fully. Now, obviously, depending on their ages and the environment you're in, you're going to have to adjust that based on your situation. But I'm a firm believer to follow the advice of what Allah talks about in the Quran about the salah. Even in one ayah, he says, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. So seek help with patience and perseverance and the salah. Yes, we do the commanding the good and forbidding the evil, but that individual person needs to develop a sense of patient perseverance on the level they're ready to end the salah. And if they center their salah and make that a part of their day, especially if they're also reading something from the Quran, even if they don't wear any hijab at all, then Allah will help them through whatever they're going through. And also perhaps He will just forgive them for that. And you have a lot of women, and I will say I've worked with youth and young girls in this situation where there's so much pressure to wear hijab. They put it on, but they're not even praying. So keep that in mind.
Barakallah feekum, jazakumullah kul khair. Sister Zakiyyah, we do have Sister Najat who has raised her hand. I will allow her to speak, inshallah. Sister Najat, if you can unmute your microphone, if you'd like to speak to Sister Zakiyyah directly, you may. Please go ahead.
Yes, Barakallahu Feek, I'm listening. You're still muted.
Yes, Sister
The
Najat is
host
still
might
muted.
need to unmute her. if the settings are such that she can't unmute herself, the host might have to do it.
Sister Salsabil, please, if you can, if the setting is that way, if you can unmute Sister Najat. Sister Najat, let us know if this is, if you raised your hand to speak or if this was by mistake. Please let us know in the chat. That's not an issue, inshallah. Okay. Sister Zakiyyah, until Sister Najat fixes, inshallah, her mic, we do have another question here. I have a question for my friend. She's always angry, astaghfirullah, with Allah, as she says she has prayed for years, have done zikr and read Quran all the time. At the end, she said she left everything on Allah, but still nothing got better after so many years. She says, I haven't gotten any peace because she see those who ruined her life, Allah is not testing them. They're getting so many happiness, but she's getting tested by Allah with everything, health, family, etc. Jazakumullah kul khair.
And is the person who's going through this, are they still kind of connected to their Islam in any way? Meaning, have they kind of like just completely given up? Or are they still in the space of Muslims venting? Are they venting to Muslims? Or are you finding out this through maybe social media?
Okay, Sister Ghufaira Khan, if you would please let us know on the chat if your friend is still practicing Islam and venting out, or okay, she is connected but angry most of the time.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that clarification. I would say this is actually a good sign. And the reason why I said that is that one of the things that we forget is that when someone is venting to you, like for example, I use this like in my work that I do, like for example, sometimes when I'm doing my mental health work or mentorship, I'll have male clients who come and are upset about, what their wife is just constantly complaining. And I tell them, if she's complaining to you, it's because she still trusts you and is reaching out for your safety and trust, right? She's reaching out to feel safe and loved by you. The biggest red flag is when she stops talking to you, okay? The same thing for our youth, okay? When they're talking to us, when they're complaining to us, that means there's still hope inside of them for safety. So here's what I do. When someone comes to me with that, I say, you know what? I tell them, look, I went through a lot of confusion myself and frustration, and I just began to talk to Allah about it. I felt it was disrespectful because many times they would say, well, I can't talk to Allah and say I'm angry. I'm like, well, he sees it already, right? Tell him. And go to Allah and say, Allah, I'm angry about this. I'm angry about that. While you're, like, for example, in your sajda, while you're in, like, I encourage, people to get up in the last third of the night, even if they struggle with their prayers, any other time, just talk to Allah and keep doing that until you get some type of answer or it's lifted from you. In most cases, when people do that, they begin to feel better because really what they wanted was a safe space to be listened to, and to not feel like they're being judged for their pain. And even for me, I've told them I've gone through things in my life, and I'll say to Allah, I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I don't understand why this and why that, why this happens to me, why this happens to so many women, why this and X, Y, and Z. And I'm crying. I'm like, and I know it's not right, but Allah, why? What is this? It's better than going to the world to receive them. So I think and then also it gets to a point where sometimes we need to point them to someone who can actually listen without being so triggered, because we might realize that sometimes the trials of another person are too much for you to carry, and that's okay. And you can tell them that, but in a kind way, say, wow, you know, I really want to help and I want to be a safe space for you. But I want you to be able to talk with someone who can receive this and be able to support you even better than I can. So here's what I suggest, in addition, obviously, to complaining to Allah, because we need the support, obviously, of Allah always, but Allah gave us each other. And give them that space to go to someone else. And I want to emphasize, even though it may not seem like it, when they are talking to you, like when your children are complaining to you, it's because they're reaching for love, support, and trust from you because they already trust you. When your wife is doing it, when the youth are doing it, this is a sign that there's still hope. And that's why I asked whether or not they had cut themselves off from completely. So just try your best to be a safe space, but let them know it's okay to complain to Allah. You know, it's okay to tell Allah about what you're going through, but and also let them know that it's completely normal. Many people go through anger with Allah. It's not healthy, it's not good, but it is what it is. It's already happening, so what do? Right? We ask them, you know, talk to Allah. We try to hold space, but know your limits. I will emphasize this when it comes to mental health. You do not have to carry everyone's burden. Your mental health matters just like theirs. Your soul matters just like theirs. There are some darknesses that are so dark that if you stay in the company of that darkness, you will be sucked into the darkness. So know your limits at the same time and know when it's time to point them to someone else.
جزاكم الله كل خير, Sister Zakiyyah. I believe we covered most of the questions. I believe we have maybe one more to go, inshallah. Let me see here. Okay, so one question here is many of our students experience Islamophobia or feel pressure to constantly defend their faith in school or at work. What can you tell them to help? What can we tell them to help them remain confident and resilient in their identity as Muslims?
Yeah, this is very, very tough. You know, because first of all, we do need to recognize that this struggle is very real. And I know for myself, my parents accepted Islam. They converted to Islam when I was the year I was born. And so growing up, some of my siblings and pretty much all of my extended family Christian, and I'm going to public school. My parents accepted this religion. I'm growing up as a child trying to figure things out. I will say, just first of all, as a person who grew up in public school after my parents accepted Islam, this is a trial unbelievable, you know, to be in this kind of space. And then also, for my case, I didn't even have Muslim family outside of some of my siblings. And we had a very small Muslim community where I grew up. This is really, really hard. In the case of the perseverance and the strength and the resilience, this can only be gotten through a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why the salah, reading the Quran, and I strongly suggest, and I tell this to all of my clients, even the youth, even if it's just one day a week or once a month, find a time to get up in the last third of the night before Fajr. Even if you just set your alarm 20 minutes before Fajr comes in and all you have time for is just 3 short rak'ah. Use that time to ask Allah for strength, because no amount of logical arguments, no amount of witty responses is going to let them be able to be strong enough to go through this unless they have a relationship with Allah. And also, but just as a practical advice, when people are constantly attacking Islam, we need to stick to the foundations, like who Allah is, Tawheed, and it's okay to say, I don't know. Like a lot of things, one of the things that I wish I knew growing up was that it's okay to say, I don't know. I'm not a scholar. I just know I believe in Allah, you know, and his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I'll ask someone and let you know if you know, if and if the question is sincere. And the reason why I say I wish I knew that, because I grew up during the time where Religious debates were very normal. And then when I went to college, it was like, may Allah have mercy on him and bless him for the work that he did while he was alive. May Allah have mercy on him. Ahmed Didat, it was like, oh, he always has an answer, so I need to have an answer. And I thought that I needed to have an answer. And when I realized I didn't, it's okay to say I don't know. I was like, oh, because a lot of the stress that is because we think we have to have a response to everything, but we don't. And if we want one single response, use the last part of Surah Al-Kafirun. Lakum dinukum waliyadin. To you be your religion and to me be mine. Well, your religion doesn't make sense. I say, okay, it's mine. It doesn't have to make sense to you. It makes sense to me. Lakum dinukum waliyadin. You don't have to go back and forth and have an answer for everything, especially when the people doing it aren't really looking for answers anyway. So, but in terms of withstanding that, there's no other option except they absolutely must have a relationship with Allah, a relationship with Salah and Quran. And I strongly suggest Qiyamul Layl, even if it's just once a month. And I tell my clients, choose the day of the week, if you're doing it once a week, where you don't have to go to school or work in the morning. So you don't have to stress over your sleep. So if you don't have to work on or go to school on Saturday, do it on the Friday night when you go to sleep, wake up. And so you can sleep after Fajr, but there gets to a point where there's nothing that can help you except that you have a consistent relationship. It doesn't have to be perfect, but with your Salah and with your Quran, there's no other way around it. And being in those environments is one of them, because many of these people end up living double lives. And I've worked with many youth like that, living completely double lives. And the parents think, they go to the masjid on the weekend, and this is totally normal for youth. They go to the masjid on the weekend or during Eid, covered up or looking like a Muslim, or for the young men around all the Muslims, identifying as Muslim, but then they have a whole other life going on that they're hiding from their family. Why? And we have to take accountability for this because we put them in those environments, whether it's in the environment of the entire United States of America or the UK, or just the environment of the public school. It doesn't mean that we were wrong, but we still have to take accountability for the fact that we put them in an environment that is going against their fitrah every single day. And that's a trial that even the Sahaba were not tasked with, because they made the hijrah from Mecca to Medina, away from that, and then from first to Abyssinia, okay, because that's not natural for a Muslim to be constantly around so much antagonism. It's not healthy. Even the Sahaba weren't able to withstand all of that. And some of the ones who didn't migrate ended up just showing up in the battlefield opposite some of the Muslims, even though they didn't want to fight. And this is in the tafsir about some of the revelations, especially about those who say we were weak and oppressed in the land. They were so weak, they ended up showing up to pretend that they were on the side of the disbelievers. So do keep in mind, this is a very severe trial. And one of the reasons that I moved to Saudi Arabia when my daughter was like 8 years old was because I didn't want her to go through that. I just didn't want her to go through that. It's very, 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 very difficult.
بارك الله فيكم جزاكم الله كل خير.
Right.
Sister Zakiyyah, we do have a comment here from Sister Asma. Dear Sister Zakiyyah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your good deeds. Allahumma ameen. I am from Canada and your talk has been very helpful. Our school is under the umbrella of Muslim Association of Canada. We have incorporated in our curriculum an excellent program under the title Tarbiyah, which is definitely instilling in our children very important ethics and very positive mindset regarding Islam and connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am leaving the webinar as I have some personal matters. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide our youth in the correct path with muraqabah, husnul khuluq, and be khalifas for the future generations. Ameen. Barakallah fikum. Jazakum Allah kul khair. Sister Zakiyyah, Barakallah fikum. Jazakum Allah kul khair. We have covered all the questions. I would really, on a personal level, thank you so much for this truly moving and powerful session. And on behalf of Noorart and all of us here today, we do extend our heartfelt gratitude for you sharing with us your wisdom, honesty, and your deeply touching reflections. Jazakum Allah kul khair. May Allah reward you abundantly, put barakah in your work, and continue to make you a source of light, inshallah, for our generations to come. Jazakum Allah kul khair again, and we pray that this is only the beginning of many more enriching conversations, inshallah. And we look forward to having you with us again, inshallah. And I would like to thank everyone who attended today and who asked questions. And please keep an eye on your inbox, inshallah. We will always be having wonderful, inshallah, sessions and hopefully upcoming sessions with Sister Zakiyyah, inshallah, if Allah wills, bi'idhnillah. Sister Zakiyyah again, jazakumullah kul khair. And thank you so much, and we wish you a blessed day, inshallah. Barakallah fikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.